You know what's actually strange? We spend so much time celebrating intelligence. We call certain people gifted. We build entire systems to identify them early, put them in special programs, tell them they're destined for greatness. But here's what nobody tells you about people with extremely high intelligence. It's not the advantage everyone thinks it is. In fact, in some very specific and deeply human ways, it's one of the loneliest conditions a person can live with. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about what high intelligence actually looks like in real life. Not in a movie, not in a documentary, in real, everyday life. It's the kid who finishes the test in 10 minutes and spends the rest of class staring at the ceiling. It's the adult who sees the flaw in every plan before it even starts and gets called negative for it. It's the person who can't watch a movie without noticing 17 plot holes and genuinely wishes they could just enjoy it. That's not a superpower. That's exhausting. Psychologists who study high IQ individuals have found something that surprises most people. The higher your intelligence, the harder it becomes to simply switch your brain off. Research from the journal Intelligence found that people with higher cognitive ability spend significantly more time in spontaneous thought, which sounds nice until you realize that means your brain is running even when you want it to stop, even when you're trying to sleep, even when you just want 5 quiet minutes. Now here's where the psychology gets really interesting. Highly intelligent people tend to process the world differently at a fundamental level. And that starts shockingly early. Picture a 7-year-old who keeps asking why. Not why in the normal kid way. Why in the way that makes the teacher pause. Why in the way that doesn't have a simple answer. That kid isn't being difficult. Their brain is genuinely wired to look for deeper patterns, to question the logic behind the logic. But here's the problem. Most social systems, schools, workplaces, even families, aren't built for that. They're built for efficiency. They're built for conformity. And a brain that keeps pulling at threads doesn't fit neatly into either. So what happens? That child learns, usually pretty fast, to hide it, to shrink, to pretend they didn't already read 3 chapters ahead, to laugh along even when the joke isn't funny, to perform a version of normal because being too much of themselves made other people uncomfortable. Psychologists call this masking, and it creates a pattern that follows highly intelligent people well into adulthood. Here's something that trips people up. You'd assume that being very smart makes you more confident. Actually, research suggests the opposite is often true. There's a well-documented phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and most people know the basic version of it. People who don't know much tend to overestimate their ability. But what's less talked about is the other end of that curve. People who know a lot tend to underestimate themselves. Because the smarter you are, the more clearly you can see everything you don't know. The more you understand the actual size of human knowledge, the smaller you feel inside of it. So, you get these extraordinarily capable people walking around quietly convinced they're frauds. Not for lack of achievement. Sometimes because of it, because they can see exactly how much luck was involved, exactly where they made mistakes, exactly how things could have gone differently. That's not modesty. That's a brain that's too honest with itself to accept the simple story. And then there's the loneliness. And this one is real. When you process the world at a different speed and depth than most people around you, connection becomes genuinely difficult, not impossible, but difficult. You're at a dinner table and someone's telling a story and your brain has already traced it forward 4 different directions. You're in a meeting and the solution seems obvious to you, and you're not sure if you should say something or whether saying something will just make everyone uncomfortable again. Dr. Lita Hollingworth, one of the earliest researchers on gifted psychology back in the 1930s, identified what she called the problem of communication. She found that children with IQs above 150 had profound difficulty finding peers they could genuinely connect with, not because they were arrogant, but because when the gap between how you think and how the people around you think becomes too wide, real connection becomes very hard to maintain. And that doesn't fully go away in adulthood. Highly intelligent adults often report feeling like they're translating themselves constantly, simplifying, holding back, choosing which version of their thoughts is safe to share in which room. That takes an enormous amount of energy, and over time, it creates a very specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. Here's another thing that surprises people. Extremely high intelligence is often paired with extremely high sensitivity. Researchers use the term overexcitabilities, a concept developed by Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski. He found that gifted individuals tend to experience the world more intensely across the board, not just intellectually, Emotionally, physically, psychologically, music hits differently, injustice feels unbearable, criticism lands harder than it should. That commercial with the sad dog absolutely destroys them. This isn't weakness, it's just how the wiring works. A brain calibrated to pick up on subtle patterns and connections doesn't suddenly switch that off when the input is emotional rather than intellectual. It processes everything at high resolution. And high resolution is beautiful sometimes, and completely overwhelming other times. Now, here's what's fascinating about how highly intelligent people cope. Many of them become deeply private, not cold, private, because they've learned that showing the full picture of how they think tends to create distance, not connection. They become experts at reading rooms, adjusting themselves, giving people a comfortable version without handing over the whole thing. Many develop very specific, sometimes obsessive interests, not hobbies, deep dives, rabbit holes that go for years, because that's where the brain finally feels like it's running at the right speed. That's where there's no ceiling to how far they can go. And many develop a very particular kind of dark humor, not because they don't care, because they care so much about everything, and the only release valve that works is laughing at the absurdity of it all. Sound familiar? That's the same armor Gen X built. Smart people across every generation tend to find the same exit door when the world feels like too much. But here's what's really important to understand. Extremely high intelligence does not protect you from bad decisions. It does not guarantee success. It does not make you emotionally mature or wise or happy. In fact, research published in the journal Psychological Science found that higher intelligence is associated with higher rates of anxiety, rumination, and existential worry. The brain that can solve complex problems is the same brain that can catastrophize a minor social interaction at 2 in the morning for 45 minutes. The gift and the burden are the exact same thing. They're not separate. You cannot take the pattern recognition without the overthinking. You cannot take the depth without the weight of it. What highly intelligent people need, more than anything, isn't more stimulation. It isn't a harder problem to solve. It's what every human being needs. Permission to be fully themselves without performing a smaller version for the comfort of others. Real connection with people who don't need them to translate. Rest. Actual rest. The kind that comes when you finally feel understood. Because here's the thing about carrying a very fast mind through a world that moves at a different pace. It's remarkable, and it's quietly, deeply hard, and most people doing it never say so out loud, they just carry it. Get on with it, and figure it out alone. Because that's what they've always done.